All right, good evening. This is I'm Marlen from Opus IVS, one of the 360 techs here for Toyota and Lexus. Thank you guys for joining us tonight in this webinar we got. We're going to dive into a few tips and tricks and diagnostic procedures with Toyota Lexus vehicles using the DrivePro and other methods as well with the different service information and things that we'll need to run through. At any time during the webinar, if you guys have any questions, there is a chat box live where we can view and answer your questions, or if you have any questions about looking into different tools or anything like that we have to offer, we could definitely send you some links into that. And without further ado, we will get started. All right. Let's see here. All right. So the things we're going to go over tonight are a few different steps in mostly diagnostic, because a lot of it has changed from our simple diags where they're not as simple anymore, even for Toyota. So we're going to go over post-repair calibrations with module replacement, insight to live diagnosis and techniques, different strategies on diagnosing the FKS D4S motors. Those are the dual injected high pressure, low pressure systems. Different scenarios that we've been seeing on a lot of failures that are not typical for a Toyota, put it that way. And we're going to dive into a little bit on the new software of Global Techstream, because it's kind of transferring to where we're going to have to use some of that sometimes here, and just kind of the best diagnostic efficiency that we can get into. All right, so we'll jump into that. So the first thing we'll touch on is Global Techstream. Techstream's been around since like 05. We've all used it, many times. Hasn't really changed. The new Techstream, Global Techstream, is not much different. One huge different though is it's an online web-based setup now. Once you get into it, it's very much like using the older Techstream. Not, like I said, not much different, but it is web-based and it has had its battles over the last couple months. So it's one thing to definitely have to learn some patience with it compared to what we used to have. A little bit we'll talk about it is what models actually require it, the functions that it has over the new Techstream, and the compatible interfaces. So as far as the way it looks, if you've used Techstream before, you'll see here this is not much different than you do in a health check using the older Techstream. Different colors, a little bit different setup menus. Overall, the same thing. So as a usage, it's not that hard. If you know how to use the older one, you'll be able to use the new one, no problem. And the interfaces haven't changed a lot either. They still use a lot of the same ones, a lot of the ones we offer as well. The Mongoose, all the versions of that still work with it. Our newer one, the Super Goose, it works with the Toyota GTS software as well. Cardac 2 is a little bit older, a little bit dated. A lot of guys still have it. It still works well with Toyota. So if you have one, you can still use it. The Cardac 3 Plus, which is a more relevant one, the one we have out now, works well with it too, as well as our Cardac Pro. So all of these, if you have any of those will work well with it, because there is situations where Toyota has kind of turned the shoulder to us and made it to where we have to use their software for certain instances. Let me backtrack one time also. As far as models go, you're mostly going to find that you're going to have to use it on certain 20 and a half to 21 and up Toyota and Lexuses. There's certain functions that just aren't out in everyone's scan tool yet. So they kind of force your hand to use that. So anything, like I said, you get around the 2020 model year ballpark, you may end up needing some GTS functions. So next we're going to go into post-repair calibrations and module replacements. First one of the things you would need Techstream on, not all manufacturers are there yet. I don't know if, as of right now, if there's any that's doing it yet, but Toyota uses a set of codes called rules of behavior. They're a code that you can only scan and read with a lot of tools, or a lot of times with Techstream. You mostly find those codes when you have pre-collision issues, something like that. They're very descriptive. They will set a code in the engine if you drove the car 2 feet with the door open, or you put it in reverse while the vehicle was still in motion. things like that. Those ones aren't as significant versus where with ADAS and driver assistance codes, those ones can keep a light on. So we'll dive into those a little bit. One of the other newer functions is the ECU security key write, which is something same again you're going to find in 1920 model year module replacements. Is going to require to essentially do a handshake with the security system and the rest of the modules. We'll cover a few module replacements, our ABS calibrations, and we'll dive into our clearance warning, intuitive park assist, and radar, more of our driver assistance functions. So with record of behavior, in order to get it through Techstream, you have to do a health check, which is where it does a full vehicle scan, which this is one of the screenshots here from the older Techstream, but same as GTS. What you'll see, it's going to have all your modules on the left, and then on the right, you're going to have all your fault codes, current history and pending. Further to the right, you're going to have calibration ID numbers, whether that module needs to be calibrated or configured. If you look to the right where it says ROB, there's going to be these green bubbles. Those bubbles are ROB codes that are stored in the vehicle. The downside to ROB is they take a while. So like this vehicle here had about 10 to 15 of them. You can't just go through and wipe them all out with one time, not with Techstream. You have to go through each individual one, read it, clear it, then rerun a health check to confirm if it's still there or not. So yeah, these green bubbles here to the right signify that you have a more descriptive action going on. And here's an example of some of the ROB codes. As you can see here, this was from an engine shot. Accelerator pedals signal is high, opening too fast. Just different things. A lot of times you'll find in the engine, and they're not that important. They're there, but they're not going to cause a lot of lights and stuff. Versus in your ADAS or your driver history, you can have no codes in the system, completely working system, and still have a pre-collision warning light. A lot of times it's because of your ROB codes. So definitely check those, or if you don't have access to Techstream, call us. We can help you do that through your drive tool or some of your other tools and go through and check those codes and clear them for you as well. ECU security key write. It's not required for every module. So far, what we found in what Toyota and Lexus has released, you find it more for ECM replacements, SRS modules, power steering racks, some of your body modules. And it can lead you up the wrong tree very fast. Because you can, like, for example, you can put in an SRS module and calibrate the seat weight occupancy and everything else the SRS module needs, and still come up with codes saying, hey, my SRS module can't communicate, can't do this, can't do that. That does require you to be able to sign in and log into TIS. Again, another function that we can do for you guys if you have a drive tool and you don't have TIS or just don't feel like doing it, that's something we could definitely go in and do with you. Here's a list of the most current Toyota vehicles. As you can see, again, mostly when you start getting into 2020, 2021, this is also a list that you can find in some of the service information. So if you're ever not sure about something, or hey, am I gonna need this? You could definitely look it up and see there's actually a service bulletin with this information in it that will tell you each vehicle that will or could need an ECU security key write. And if you look in the top left in the red box, you'll see ECU security key. Same thing, you still have to do a health check in order to produce to see if it needs one. Where it says necessary, it'll be flashing red letters, or if you're using GTS, it'll be flashing blue letters. That's saying, hey, this module needs a security handshake, essentially. And if you look down here in the bottom, next to the little blue guy with the little satchel, there's an ECU and a key. Once you click that, it will at that point then bring you into TIS, have you log in, and we'll start performing the ECU security key write. There's nothing else you really have to do but follow the prompts. It's very simple. You just kind of click OK as it goes along. And once it gets to the end, you rerun your health check, and you will see that necessary is no longer flashing. And then your ECU security key box will no longer be highlighted. And here's an example of the codes. This was on a 2020 Corolla. It had the SRS module replaced. Everything was done correctly. It was configured. It had everything it needed to work correctly, but it didn't have the ECU security key right done. So what you see about these codes, and the other downside to them is when you look these up in TIS, it tells you nothing about doing a security key right. It just has you go down the line of diagnosing it as a communication problems with the restraints control module and the multi acceleration sensor, which is also part of the restraints control module. So you will get misleading codes, and the service information is not as helpful either. It can lead you down the wrong path if you start getting these communication codes and haven't checked to see if the vehicle has had a or needs a ECU security key right. So next, we will get into some of our module replacements. For years, Toyota has been very lenient, very easy on module replacements. They were one of the few manufacturers, well, not few, but one of the manufacturers that didn't really care about used modules for the most part. What we're seeing now is getting harder to do used modules because of things like ECU security keys. When it comes to driver assistance modules, a lot of them are one-time use. So we'll briefly cover ECM replacement, mostly because there are some things that have changed with ECM replacement. Before, if you got a new ECM from the dealer, you plugged it into the car, wrote the VIN number to it, started it up, drove away, your day was done. Or if you did a used module, still the same process. You wrote the VIN to it, except this time you jump pins 4 and 13 in the data link connector for 30 minutes, and that would do an immobilizer handshake between the ECU security module and our engine module. What they also have added is a configuration um, feature that needs to be done to the module, which is more of a programming, but it's one of the other things that will give you a lot of faults and a lot of weird issues if it's not done, which we'll dive into that here in a little bit too. Same thing with our body modules. Most Toyotas, you could take a body module, swap it from car to car to car. It didn't care as long as it's the correct module. Our clearance warning module, which runs a lot of our park assist sensors in the front bumper, radars, and things like that. And then our ABS modules. There's a few things that change with that as well. But this is kind of like what I repeated before. Go in, do your pin jumps if it's used. If it's new, you write your VIN. I typically like to check for updates because you don't know how long this ECM has sat on the shelf since an update or something to change some of the software has been released. So I typically will at least check to see if it's been done. And here is an example of ECM configuration. Now, this vehicle was pretty new, a 2023 Lexus 600. If you go in, same thing, health check. You have to do a health check to get any of this stuff to generate. You'll see over here in the highlighted box where this is under active noise module where configuration is checked yes. What that is really doing is you see down below it, it says it has a calibration box. It's really updating the module. It's forcing you to put software on it where before it didn't make you do it. And not in terms make you do it, but it's putting the most recent software on there and software calibration correct for the car, depending on what model it is. If it has certain features or don't, instead of you having to go back through and redo it a different way, it's kind of making it part of the module replacement process. I mean, as far as the way that goes, you just click yes, and it'll bring you through a couple menus, a couple warnings, make sure your battery voltage is sufficient, everything like that. And then you'll click reprogramming start. Once you click that, same thing. You just kind of follow through the prompts and let it do its thing. And then once we get to you have to get down here to log in. That's the other thing with GTS. There's several logins where before we never really needed to log in, maybe once or twice, but there's multiple login steps to make sure that you are who you say you are. And Toyota wants to know that apparently. So you'll log in, and this screen will come up. You put in your username, your password, and some of the things that, like I said, that haven't changed from Techstream to GTS is this. So we all remember Calibration Update Wizard. It's a separate window that pops up that does your actual physical moving of the software into the modules. It's still doing it now. As you can see, if you The screen's just updated. It's a little bit fancier, different colors. Same procedures. You're just going through and updating and reflashing that module. Once it's completed, same. You'll just follow your prompts, go through your steps, rerun a health check, and it'll show you, hey, this module now has the current software, which means it is correctly configured. And then after the health check, you'll see here that your configuration now says no, there's 0 DTCs, and your update is good. So next we'll get into some of the ABS gate control modules. Not a ton has changed on these, but they changed a lot of the terminology and the wording in the scan tool. So where we had linear valve offset, they changed it to a different. Excuse me, I forget the name. It's valve set. It's a very different name than we remember, but all it is saying linear valve offset. That's all it is. So after you get a new module in, a lot of people that we run into, they'll get to where they can't do the linear valve offset or the steering angle won't set. You have to go through and reset your memory prior to doing any calibration. Even with a new module, it's supposed to do this during the bleed procedure. A lot of times, for whatever unknown reason, it doesn't. So you'll find after you bleed the vehicle that you are left with linear valve offset malfunction and steering angle sensors. So go through, reset your memory in the ABS, and then that will allow it to accept new calibrations. A couple things that will hold it up. One of the obvious ones is the incorrect steering wheel alignment. Or if you're trying to calibrate with your steering wheel turn, pointed at 6 o'clock or anything but straight, it will just fail. It won't tell you why. It'll just fail. The other big thing is voltage. You're not technically reflashing it, but you don't want to be doing this at 11.2 volts. You still want to have it around our normal 13.5, 13.6. That will help you not run into as many issues with it. And then the last thing to touch on with linear valve offset, run into this a lot. Like, let's say you forget to do the reset memory. If you try to do linear valve offset too many times, it will lock the module out, for lack of a better terms. Doesn't lock it out into a way that it can't be used again, but you'll have to disconnect the battery, let it sit for up to 30 minutes, reconnect your battery, and that will reset the attempts. There's no counter. There's nothing that really tells you that, but if you dig in the service information, it'll tell you. And it's usually after 5 attempts that are failed, it won't accept new ones until a battery reset has been done. And typically, you always want to do your steering angle sensor reset, your G and yaw rate first, because the linear valve offset will not calibrate if there's any other codes in it other than linear valve offset code. So even though steering angle, G and yaw rate are part of our calibrations, if you don't do them first, it will just make the offset mad and you'll never get it calibrated. You'll kind of just keep going in a vicious circle. So always try to remember reset memory, steering angle, G and yaw rate, linear valve offset. You're mostly going to find this on the beloved Lexus LS460 and almost any hybrid. The reason I say the beloved LS460 is they seem to be way more problematic than the hybrids because it is a gas engine car, non-hybrid car, that they have put a hybrid brake system in. And they're pretty prone to failure. There's a lot of service bulletins, a lot of information out there about them. Doesn't make them any easier to bleed, calibrate, anything like that. So just something to keep in mind, when you run into this again. And also with ABS, especially with the LS460s, the hybrids, you'll also find that a lot of times you'll get the car in and you'll hear a pump running for about 2 to 5 seconds, shut off. 2 to 5 seconds, it just keeps going over and over and over. What that's a good indicator of is what you'll have codes for it as well, but it's not totally failed, but our accumulator has some sort of leak, whether it be an internal brake fluid leak or an external leak, like a brake hose, fitting, pipe, something like that. That's usually a sign that most of the time it's an internal leak. And a lot of times you're going to find that that's also going to wear out your pump. So you always want to replace those together. You never want to just replace just one because you'll find out soon enough that, well, now you have a pump problem. So always try to do those in pairs. And then our driver assistance ADAS. So this is going to include any of your blind spot module, front radar, front facing camera, and your ultrasonic clearance sensors. But we'll touch on the ultrasonic sensors a little bit more first because they seem to be more common because they're in a spot that gets damaged more. You know, they're in the front bumper, they're in the rear bumper. So with our clearance warning sensors, a lot of times you will get codes that will say the sensor is not initialized or something along those lines. The sensor's initialization process is putting in the angle that is being read off the gauge. So if you're not familiar with it, you have to put in the bumper type because there's two different style bumpers which have different angles. Once you put in the bumper type, there's a variance of where that sensor has to be able to be pointing to be able to read properly. So what we do is we put a digital angle gauge on the front of it, and that angle gauge will give us a readout of where our sensors are at, where they're pointing in degrees. And you go in, you put that into the scan tool, which I'll show you here in a little bit too, how you do that. And as long as it's within the parameters that it likes, that's your initialization. There's no other programming resets or anything that needs to be done, except one that'll trick you on certain model cars, which I will dive into that too as well. Then our millimeter wave radar. This thing tends to get pretty beat up as well because it sits right there behind the emblem of our plastic bumper. So you get in a fender bender or something like that. Your radar may not get mangled, but it sits in a plastic holder that is not that strong. So almost any time this thing has been in any sort of collision, always inspect that and check it and see, because even though it may look okay, a lot of times you will find that the holder is cracked or broken or has shifted over. And the only thing it'll do is just keep failing its calibration. Other than that, it can run you in a circle if you're not familiar with them. And over here to the right is one of the trihedrals we use to calibrate our front radar. This is one of the things you'll need service information for because it's going to tell you the certain distance to put the target out in front of the car, whether it needs to be offset this side or this side. This is also a tool that's offered by Opus. You know, it's something that you can't get from us if you're interested in doing a little more of the driver assistance calibrations without taking on full-blown ADAS, because you can use this on several different Japanese cars as well, with Honda, Kia, and things like that. This will also work with blind spots, Toyotas, and so it serves more than one purpose. So you can get some good use out of it. The other thing that I was mentioning, running into holdups and things like that, but did want to show you what it looks like using the DrivePro to enter in some of this information. So if you do have some of the targets, like our trihedral, you can go in and do a front beam axis adjustment or front beam axis reading, which will just tell us two things: where the target actually is, and then you measure it and put it where it's actually at to input into the module. So our front axis reading will tell us where it's at. Our front beam offset will tell us if it's offset, one way or the other. And then our adjustment is actually going in and it recognizing where the beam and everything is. So the DrivePro is capable of doing some of these things. And if you go in to do like your front beam axis misalignment reading, this is what the screens will look like. A lot of your basic preliminary stuff, make sure your vehicle's on a flat surface, tire pressures are equal. You don't want any metal around to interfere with it. You don't want people standing in between, because obviously those can negatively affect your calibration. Also, there's a lot more in-depth exactly how much space you'll need, depending on the vehicle, per the service information as well. But just wanted to kind of give you guys a peek of what it looks like, where you need to go in the DrivePro. And then blind spot monitors. Everyone knows what they do, where they are. They can be a little bit tricky. Our blind spot monitors are mounted to a bracket in the upper, below the taillight portions of our bumpers. So they're pretty common to get damaged because of where they are. Just they're in a pretty accident prone area. What you're going to find a lot of times is you'll put a new one on, you'll get everything set up, and you're still running into trouble getting that blind spot to calibrate. The blind spot monitor mounts to a bracket, which we see here. The blue is your actual blind spot monitor. They have module A, module B. A is on your driver's side rear, B is on your passenger side rear. Maybe a little bit hard to see in the pictures here, but it's mounted to a bracket that is either going to be bolted or welded to the body. Usually, if that blind spot monitor has suffered some sort of impact, your bracket's going to be damaged as well. So a lot of times people will put one on, try to calibrate it, get frustrated. Well, at that point, a lot of times your car is going to have to go back to the body shop, or if you can make the repair yourself to bring that bracket back into a normal place. And here is also showing the use of our indicator of our dial for the degrees. This will also tell us there's specs in the service information that will tell us where this blind spot module needs to be positioned for it to read correctly. So if you're unsure or you made a repair and you want to double check the repair to see that it's in spec, this angle gauge meter will tell you where it's at and if it's happy or not. Excuse me. This is an example of the space you will need. Each vehicle can be a little bit different, but blind spots do require more space than you would with a radar or anything else. So it's not something you're going to just pull in the shop and do, because they can take up to 25 feet left, length and width to be able to set up. Not all are that big, but some are bigger than others. Again, just it depends on the vehicle. Same again. Here's our trihedral. This is something you can still use on our for your blind spot. So that's why I say you get multiple uses out of the one tool. You don't get it and just do radars with it. You're also able to do radars and blind spots on most of the Japanese cars that are out there. And next we're going to get into, but you can spend a lot of time on these motors, the FKS and the D4S engines. I grouped these three issues together because they kind of work hand in hand a lot of times. Misfire approach, your lean and rich codes aren't the same as they were. And what I mean by that is the description. And live data and active testing is going to be a lot of the ways that you're going to have to use to be able to accurately diagnose the car. So we run into, a lot of folks still, haven't ran into these engines yet or just don't know about much of them yet. They do use two fuel systems, a high pressure system and a low pressure port injector system. Though this system is not new, it's been around for a lot of manufacturers. It's newer for Toyotas. They started introducing it, I want to say in 2016, and have been changing it since then. But as we moved into, 17, 18, 19 and up cars, they have added new codes and new strategies, the way it's looking at different faults and failures. So when it comes to misfires, a misfire seems pretty cut and dry most of the time. It's just a misfire. Why do we need to dig into this? You'll see why. So when it comes to misfires, a lot of us have the notion of, let me clear the codes, go drive it and see what it does. And if that's what you're going to do, that's fine. Save your freeze frame data, because this can be your best friend when it comes to diagnosis some of these more strange misfires. It's not going to be your typical bad coil, because now you're running two fuel systems, and now you got to determine which fuel system is the cause of the issue, or if it's another issue. You're still going to do your standard misfire diagnosis. We're not skipping that by a long shot. Swapping coils, inspecting plugs, ensuring that we have signal to a certain cylinder. Most of the time, you're going to find that the car doesn't just come in with a dead cylinder. It's going to be a misfire while under load, at idle, a higher idle, I should say, around 12 to 1800 RPM when the car's taken off, or when you jam on the throttle, give it a lot of load, and you'll start seeing misfires that way. They're not misfiring as much just at idle. When they do, that's usually a more obvious thing, like a coil or something like that. Couple of ways we go with that is checking the misfire counts for our port and direction, and a couple active test methods that we like to use, which we'll get into here in just a minute. So as you can see here on the sides of the screen, your first data list display, this is going to be under an active test. You can do this with, your DrivePro or, our Techstream or something like that. What you're going to want to do, first thing I like to do is go in and control the injection mode. What that is doing is you're using a slider scale. You're going to look at all your cylinders, and you can look at any data you want to. Just I like to look at the misfires and sometimes my O2 sensors. Because what you're going to be able to do is pick whether you're on port or direct, and then you're going to be able to lean and richen the engine out. What we're looking for there is to see, okay, when we're going down the road, we're trying to simulate a driving pattern. Does it tend to misfire when the engine starts leaning out a little bit, or when it starts richening the mixture? And that's why I bring in freeze frame data, because then you could kind of look at your freeze frame data and try to mimic in the bay or out on the road when the car misfired and what time it did it and how it did it. So that's why I say always hold on to your freeze frame data when you start getting these weird lean codes and misfires. Because as you richen the mixture left to right, lean to rich, you may find that, okay, when I'm in port mode, I can go full lean, full rich, never have an issue. You can switch it to direct mode, go full lean, full rich. Oh, now I start getting a little shake. I start getting misfire counts on number 3. So that'll show you what is going on what cylinder and when it wants to do it versus just kind of guessing. Um, there's several different injection data PIDs you can pull up. It doesn't have to just be misfires. Like I said, I like to look at O2 sensor values, what the voltage is doing when you slide it left to right, because I want to look for a lazy sensor, especially if we're looking at a lean code. And then down below here, we'll see in our service information, Toyota has duration times for when it's going to start registering and setting misfire codes. So as we see here, idling can take up to 8 minutes or more unless you have a catalyst efficiency, or excuse me, catalyst damaging misfire, which is just a dead cylinder. Then as you go increase the engine RPM, you'll also notice that your duration kind of comes down. So that's another thing you can look at as well is if you're sitting there idling, it's going to take a while for it to register misfires, up to 8 minutes or more. So typically you want to move the car, drive it around, bring the RPMs up, put it under a load, and that will help you, kind of dig down into that misfire a little bit more. And as you can see down in here, it's not very cut and dry. You will see that as you dig into some of the service information, it has a little bit more information that was supported here. Just want to give you an example of it. After you do your slider counts with controlling the injection volume, things like that, they'll bring up a chart saying, hey, there's no misfire counts. Toyota loves to say check for intermittent problems. If 1 or 2, it could be port. It could be excuse me, it could be direct or port. And it just depending on what the car does, how it responds, go to this step. Hey, all right, this is indicating a bad injector. Because a lot of times you're going to find that you're not just going to have a flat failed injector. You're going to have to change its fueling to see what it's doing to be able to pinpoint where it's misfiring, how it's misfiring, and what conditions can force it to do that. And next, we're going to kind of get into our lean codes. Reason I kind of going with these together, a lot of times, depending on the type of misfire, you'll find that you're going to have lean codes with it as well. So as we see up top, our typical rich and lean codes, 171 through 175, nothing surprising or new there. But as we get into these new additional ones, the 117.0 and the 117B0, fuel injector performance port, fuel injector performance direct. Um, Something I will say just out of doing these, don't read into the descriptions too much because that does not mean that's the problem. Their Toyota Lexus code descriptions have gotten pretty poor over the years. And if you see port injector and run with it, it can definitely mislead you. Because if you look through a lot of the diagnostic and the trouble trees, even though it says port injector, you can have a bad direct injector. Same thing for direct. You can have a bad port setting a direct code. So a little misleading, so don't, like I said, don't lean into it too much. Still go through and follow your data. So here's an example of some of the many of the things that we're going to look at when we're looking at lean code. Um, Not different for any other car, but like again for Toyota with new high pressure systems, if you're a Toyota guy, it can be new to you because you may not have worked on Jaguars, Land Rovers, BMWs with high pressure systems. Like for example, this car was set in a lean code, so we went through, looked at the data, checked all of our fuel pressures. Our target fuel pressure was met for the low side. Our target fuel pressure was met for the high side. One of the things you still see here is at the same time, there's all this different information. Don't forget the basics. This mass airflow sensor had a problem. It was faulty. Um, this engine should have been around 3.5 to 3.6 grams per second. It was reading about 2.6 and dropping down even further. So even though we have all these, different additional codes, still don't forget the basics. You're still going to check your PCV hoses, your intake boots. You're still going to smoke the system, your purge valves. So, even though we get all this different stuff, don't overlook simple things because they can trip you up a little bit. And here's another example of controlling the injection volume. There's no data over here on the right, but whatever system you pick to watch will be displayed on the right side. So if you pick misfires, oxygen sensors, or whatever data you're looking at, it will show it as it changes live time. And when you do this injection volume test, excuse me, you want to have the engine at operating temperature and bring it up to about 3,000 RPMs or less. 2,500 to 3,000 is fine because we want the cats warm, we want the engine warm, coolant temperature up, so that way you get more accurate readings. Um, you're going to use this test as well with lean codes, just like we use it on misfires. Because a lot of times, if you find that it's not your basic lean code things, like a air hose or something like that, or fuel pressure, we want to see when it's leaning out. Typically, you're going to look at your oxygen sensor and your air fuel sensor voltages because as we adjust this slider, negative to positive, we want to see that our voltages are reacting in the ways they should. So it's a good test to look through and see if you have a lazy responding sensor, a stuck sensor, or anything along those lines, because you at that point you can look at your voltage and know exactly what it's doing. Um, Also, again, back to service information, Toyota has supplied a chart with this, where you go through, you list out all of your, it lists out all of the conditions and what the voltages should be. So it gives you a good normal idling, and then when you move it one way rich, one way lean, it gives you examples of what a stuck sensor is doing or what it should be, and on down the line for each of the four sensors, if the car has four sensors. So again, controlling the injection volume is one of the big things that I never used years ago. Now I use it on a daily basis because it gives us the information that you don't find, you know, just driving the car or looking at codes or anything along those lines. Excuse me. And another cause of our cylinder imbalance codes, apologize about that, guys. Allergies. So our cylinder imbalance code. So you go through, you check everything, nothing's adding up. These cars are starting to have big problems with our valve train. Things we've never seen before, like the valve guides wearing out and allowing the valve to walk around on the head. You would think that you would have a little bit more issues than you do. Every now and then you'll get a brief misfire, but for the most part, you get a imbalance code. Excuse me. And Toyota has a few bulletins out on this. I got a video here of, this is an extreme case. You're not always going to find them this obvious, but this is what's happening on a lot of the FKS engines, the A25, the four-cylinder engine and the V6. You're starting to see a lot of these heads running into valve failures. So as you can see how here, both valves are wobbling pretty good, which is obviously what we don't want, which I'll play that back again if you guys want to see it. The tricky part about this is a lot of times you can do a leak down test, you can do a compression test, doesn't always show its face. A lot of the times the engine needs to be warm. Then the valve gets even more loose than it already is, and then you start developing these lean code problems and things like that. So, like I said, just another thing to keep an eye out. Like I said, this is, if you know Toyotas, that's not a common issue that we see with worn valve guides, but I have diagnosed several of them. A few of them we have found it doing a leak down test. Um, Something I would suggest is do the leak down test warm. Not something I would typically always do, but do it warm. You'll have a better chance of seeing if that valve is wobbling around. And some of the other common issues that we're seeing, a lot of this still ties in together. A PCS off light, which that's going to tie into our pre-collision system. A backup battery booster malfunction, trailer brake control module communication problems, cylinder head casting failures, and BVT failures. We'll touch on the backup booster first, because it's not as common, but I have had it kick my butt a lot more than I really like to admit. You'll find on RX 350s, Highlanders, usually 2018 and up, that run a stop start system. Now, stop start isn't new; it's something that's been around for years, but again, it's new for Toyota. We have found that you're running into cars that will set a fault for a backup battery booster malfunction. And when you look that up, that the description is not great. The service information is not great either. Just kind of tells you to check your basic with wires and replace a booster malfunction or replace the backup battery booster. Cool, easy enough. What you will find is that the car doesn't actually have a backup battery booster. So then it's like, okay, well, why am I setting faults for this? It's not here. Why is it looking for it? So your cars that are equipped with a booster have premium audio. So the premium navigation and an amplifier. They use that booster to up the power, so that way when the car's off at a red light and you're jamming with the amplifier booming and all that, you don't drop down below voltage and the car won't start. Well, what's happening is when the car doesn't have that and you have this code, you're having an internal malfunction of your stop start module. Seems apparent, seems pretty obvious, but if you go through and look this up, never mentions it. Never tells you, never points you in the direction of saying, hey, your stop start module is corrupt. We need to fix that. It just tells you to check for a system that's not there. So just something to keep in mind. We are starting to see more and more of them fail. A lot of the failures, I know this is kind of pinpointed, come from the fog lights. When after the vehicle's been into an accident, like say a fog light gets busted and it gets shorted, the fog lights do work into your backup battery and your stop start ECU if it has a backup battery. So what we have found is a damaged fog light will short and then in turn damage your stop start ECU. So like I said, stuff that you would never really put the two together, fog light taking out a module, but it is happening. And your park distance off warning. This is usually an orange indicator in the instrument cluster. A lot of people overlook it or don't notice it because it's something that you can turn on and off from your steering wheel controls in the instrument cluster. But you'll find, in certain cases, as you can see here listed in the red boxes, after you replace a park assist ECU, you do an alignment, steering angle, battery, front sensor or bumper, rear sensor or bumper. Everything will be working, but you'll have a PCS light on that you can't go through toggle on and off. What you need to do is an intuitive park assist steering adjustment. First time I ran into this, I spent a lot more time on it than I really want to admit. Again, it's not really in the service information. It's in there in different tidbits, but not just if you look up and say PCS light on. So if you've replaced any of these, and this again is something you can do in your DrivePro, is you will go to your park assist system and you'll see park assist detection. You'll click that, and then over here in the box to the left, you select whatever system you did. So the most common one is a battery or a steering angle sensor, or your front clearance sensors or your front bumper. Even though the sensor's calibrated properly, the bumper's fitted nice, it's not crooked and hanging off the side of the car, you still go in and you have to do this adjustment. So it's very simple. Like I said, you just pick the system that you need, follow the prompts, and then once you do that, you will find that now more than likely your PCS light is off. If it's still on, you're having a little bit more problems that you kind of got to dig back into your front sensors or something like that. Another more model specific vehicle problem. A lot of us don't think we're going to see this kind of stuff, but if you deal with any kind of body shop after the fact repairs, you're going to see 22s, 24s rolling in the door. So a lot of this is a learning curve because, like I said, not to just trash Toyota by a long shot, but the information doesn't lead you to where you really need to go. So, like some of the older generations of the Tundras, the new Tundra, depending on the model grade, comes equipped with a trailer brake controller and module. What you're going to find is a fault code UO137-87, and there's a TSB for that, which I have listed down here. So it's like, okay, cool. We have a TSB for the problem. We have a code. It's got to be the same thing. What the TSB is having you do is check the calibration of the forward-facing camera. A lot of times you're going to find if you have this code, 9 times out of 10 that I've ran into it, the camera has had the correct calibration on it. So there's nothing to do. So that TSB didn't apply. So that really kind of brings you back to square one. It's like, okay, why does it have me look at the forward-facing camera calibration when we're looking at our trailer brake controller and module? Back to body shop repairs. Check the part number of the camera, forward-facing camera, if it was ever been replaced. SR grade model Tundras, which is the lower grade Tundras, do not come with the trailer brake installed from the factory. If the truck has a camera that is from, let's say, a hybrid model or a little bit higher up model that does have a trailer brake, these are the codes that you're going to get. Or if it's used, because we don't know what software and what truck calibration is in that camera, it sets a trailer brake code. And you'll see that TSB doesn't apply for your truck. You look the code up, it tells you to start checking wires and communication for the trailer brake. But our trailer brake doesn't exist. So if you get that, go straight to the forward facing camera. Find out if there's been any repairs done. It's a little bit easier said than done, but get the part number off of it. Call your local dealer. Hell, you can even call us. We can look some of this stuff up as well. But that's the biggest thing is just got an incorrect forward facing camera that will set communication codes with your trailer brake. How those two go hand in hand. Here we are. And our VVT gears, mostly seeing these in the 4-cylinder 825 FKS motors. Toyota has made some changes to our gears. They used to be pretty reliable. Over the years, you would find some that would stick, or you have some of your rattles that start up, things like that. Which you find a lot of manufacturers have that problem with. The types of oil they use, extra long, service campaigns, service intervals, and then people just not changing their oil. This is none of that. This is just a flat out part failure that we're seeing. It usually ends up in a catastrophic failure. Bent valves, some kind of internal damage to the engine. There's been a few cases where people have gotten extremely lucky where it didn't bend any valves, it just ended up needing a gear. But got a video here for you guys to see. So as you can see, they're rotating the cam, and the inside of that cam is just essentially free spinning in the gear. So depending on where it stops, which I'll run that back again, you can run into valve damage. So it sets multiple different codes. A lot of times, obviously, the engine won't even start. But just something to keep in mind. When you start seeing these 4-cylinder motors, if you're seeing weird timing gear issues, a lot of times you're going to find a gear that's internally destroyed itself. As of right now, haven't found any bulletins or anything else about that yet. This is just from some real world, information and shops and providing us with problems. And here's another one. Starting to see more of. You're going to see up here at the top. This car is pretty much brand new, so very possible. It's going to be a dealer car, but just want to make you aware as these things getting older, even at 22, 23 models, we are seeing some of this kind of stuff. So if you look up top, this car is a 23 Highlander HV with the 825, FX motor with 7,400 miles on it. Setting a throttle actuator control stuck open code. That code's pretty obvious. It's saying, hey, there's something blocking the throttle. So a lot of times you get that code, first thing you do is pull a boot off, see if there's a leaf in there, or see if rodents have built something in the intake box and above the filter and it sucked it in. So any kind of blockage. What we're starting to see, not just on the Highlanders, seen on a couple Camrys, RAV4s, and different models, is if you look closer on this red circle, that is a little rubber disc with like a nippled end on it. So that is coming separated from the intake boot and is sucking itself back into the intake and getting lodged into the throttle body. And once it sees that the commanded angle doesn't match the actual angle, a lot of times it's going to go into forced throttle shutdown. We're going to go into limp mode. Car's just going to go haywire. You're not going to be able to drive it. Here's another picture of it here. This dimpled end that sticks out is supposed to just simply clip into the intake boot, which it does, but it doesn't stay in. So, this isn't just a brand new car problem. As they age, we're starting to see this more and more and more. So same thing. It seems straightforward, but if you see that code, especially on these FKS engines or FXX engines, pull your intake boot, see the throttle plate's wedged open. You're more than likely going to find that piece. To repair that, there is an updated intake boot. That's supposed to make everything happy. We have put them on and haven't seen any failures come back, so that's always a good thing as well. And more non-common Toyota problems are casting failures. So I know like I said, a lot of this looks like it's brand new cars, but this is a lot of stuff that we're already seeing in the shops. 18 model years, 20 model years. And again, if you work with body shops, you're seeing stuff up to today, 24s and stuff like that. So a lot of people are familiar that Toyota uses a head girdle, a cam tower, has a couple different names, that sits on top of the cylinder head. As you can see here, this has been resealed with that big glob of fippage on the side. And then your cams sit in that, and then your valve cover sits on top of that. So this truck was mistakenly had the cam towers resealed multiple times. It's on a newer turbo Tundra for the 22s and up, 23s and up. What we're finding is they're having casting problems. We're going to play the video here. So there's a ground bolt that goes where that air blower is going. So a lot of people think, oh, they just put too long of a bolt in and broke it. It's actually the casting's worn thin right there, and it will wear a hole into it. So if you're getting weird oil leaks running down the side of the engine, especially after some sort of repair has been made, or even if repair hasn't been made, that's the cause of it. It's just a cam tower failure. I wanted to show you this because this is another casting failure. Same thing, FKS motor, 4-cylinder 825 motors. This can also be the cause of a cylinder imbalance code. So what you're seeing here, left and right, is coolant being sucked into the valves. Some of the water jackets in the head and some of your valve seats are cracking, and it's allowing but coolant to be sucked into the valves. Again, this is more of an extreme case. Like this had a problem for a while, but you'll find you'll get random misfires on acceleration, and it's not an injector or it's not it's not a spark plug or something like that. You're more than likely, not every case, but don't be surprised when you find that there's coolant entering the cylinders. A lot of times this can be found by remove the intake, which is a little bit easier said than done. But also I've done it where you check it like you're looking at for a bad head gasket. Drive the vehicle, let it get hot, let it sit overnight, pull a spark plug out, run a camera down the cylinder. You may find there's some coolant in it as long as the valve's open. So don't mistake that for a bad head gasket. And here is a little bit closer picture of where the valve seat is cracked. So once you get a valve seat crack, that's not always going to be a cause of coolant, obviously in this case, but that will cause a cylinder imbalance code. Like I said, guys, a lot of this stuff that we're seeing in the Toyotas, if you're a Toyota guy like me, you've never seen these kind of problems before. You didn't see casting failures and gears flying apart and all that kind of stuff. But it's here. That's what's happening. The Toyotas we know and love, they hate to say they aren't as good, but they're experiencing some new problems that are pretty catastrophic in a lot of ways. So just want to make you guys aware of a lot of this kind of stuff. You could spend hours going through these misfires and cylinder imbalance and FKS motor codes. So definitely dig into your service information, or if you're not sure on one, give us a call. We've all got our butts whipped by these things a couple times, so we kind of know what we're looking at when we go into them. But at the end of the day, there's always a surprise because it's Toyota, it's easy. Well, they're not as easy anymore. They're not as solid as they used to be. Still a fan. Just hope they fix it eventually. All right, well, that's going to be it for tonight. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it, got something out of it. Um, Coming up next, we have another webinar coming up June 4th on Ford FJDS Essentials. Setting up accounts, programming, how to purchase the software, downloading it. So if you're one of the Ford guys or interested in being some of the Ford stuff, it'd be a pretty good webinar to check on getting your feet wet, getting programming with Ford and doing everything like that with it. We got a few minutes. If you guys have any questions, you can post them up in the chat. I'll go through, do my best to answer them. But hope everybody has a good night. And like I said, hope you got something out of it. And like I said, if you ever have any questions on anything we covered or anything like that, reach out to us. You guys know how to get a hold of us. Shoot us a case. Let us let us know. We'll definitely get on it and try to give you guys a hand with it. All right, let's see if we got any questions here. All right, 2018 Sienna theft light continues to flash, although the ignition turns on and recognizes the key. The certification module will not unlock the steering lock, turn off the theft light, or allow the starter to turn. Techstream will not allow us to reset module. They state it's only available for locksmiths. So when it comes to some of the theft problems, Toyota has made some changes. Now, depending on which module it is, and if the car is a key or a push button, it depends on how it wants us to do it. So if the light's flashing and the certification module won't unlock the steering lock, we need to see, because this car could have both, either a ID code box and a smart key module. We need to make sure that the smart key module is communicating correctly to the code box. And if it is, we need to make sure the code box is communicating correctly to the steering lock and the ECM. And if the vehicle has factory remote start added, that's part of it as well. So sorry, I'm going back through it and we'll sort of. And what's reset are you trying to perform on it? Like an all keys lost where you reseat the immobilizer, or something different? You can give them a minute to answer here. Because if you're trying to do a mobilizer reseat or all keys lost, that does require a locksmith code, because what's going to happen is you'll need to get a PIN number. Toyota used to generate the PIN number off the tool. It was a 90 character alphanumeric code, which that was your immobilizer code. Like when I was at a dealer, we used to be able to take the Techstream, go out to the parking lot, do a key code reset, and do it in 15 minutes to be done. Since theft has been on the rise, they're trying to protect themselves. That doesn't apply to us, but the dealer level, we had to have 2 managers sign off on it, approve it. Toyota would then send us a 6-digit code, and once we input that into the scan tool, that would turn into our 90 character alphanumeric codes. That was the dealer way. For us in the aftermarket, in order to get a smart code reset, code, you have to have a mobilizer, or excuse me, a locksmith ID, because you'll go in to like tis.toyota.com where you normally buy a subscription or something like that, you'll go through and buy a key code. And in order to buy that key code and purchase it, I think it's like an additional $15 or $20. Um, Before it lets you purchase it, you have to put in your locksmith credentials. Then it will give you a 6-digit PIN code that once you go back into do a smart code reset, when it asks for that PIN code, it will then put it in. It takes 15 minutes. It'll wipe it out, and then by itself re-enters the 90-character PIN code. So yeah, in that aspect of it, they did make that where if you weren't a dealer, you had to have a locksmith ID to do that. Let's see. And one of the other questions was the proper way to calibrate the steering angle. Yes, that's actually a good question. So a lot of times in these newer cars, you'll find that there is no actual calibration that you can do the steering angle. There's a zero that you can do in it, but it doesn't, you're not calibrating like we did in the other cars. Um, I hate to tell you, go back and look at the service information. It depends on the car. So what it'll tell you to do is, like you said, drive it in a straight line for 20 mile an hour for 5 seconds. Um, and then continue to drive the car after that. The first 5 seconds, and once you drive as straight as possible, it's what it's gonna look at where it's set to zero, and then where you're going down the road for the variance. Um, it has to be between 2 and 3 degrees, right or left. So obviously center as best as possible. But yeah, you go through reset memory, go in and do a steering angle adjustment, and a lot of times you'll go back and look, your steering angle will still say negative 720 or negative 330 or something like that. Once you go drive it, it should reset it. The reason I say should is I've had steering angles that would not reset and ended up having to replace them. And yes, if the key is turning on the switch, yeah, you don't have to program the keys, but in order to reset the ID code box, you would need an immobilizer pin code. But all right, guys, I think that's about it. If there's no more questions, we'll wrap it up for the night. And if you guys do have any questions as well, feel free to email me, shoot a case in, like Corey with the Sienna. If you need some more help with it, shoot us a message, and we'll get back into it, and I can dig in a little bit deeper and see if we can find a better answer as well. Try to help you out on that. Um, but that'll be it for tonight, guys. Hope everybody has a good evening. And if you need anything else, like I said, just reach out to us, and we'll give you guys a hand. All right. Thank you.